if they're already eating them when they're green and they're keyed in on it, you better be there when it starts raining. Let's paint the picture of it's early October. The white oaks aren't quite like, they're not prime, but you notice maybe we had one of those storms that comes through that time of year and it blows some green acorns on the ground. Well, if you'll go scout about 2 days after that, you'll find that deer are already pouncing on those green acorns. Well, when that happens, you're a week or two away from that tree naturally dropping.
Ben Davis,
Yes,
glad
sir.
to have you here, man.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very local to us. Like, you live in the same town. I actually saw you at church 2 weeks ago. And I was
Really?
gonna come say hey, but my 3-year-old was acting.
Hey, I feel you. I feel you, buddy.
But man,
Well, next time, come say hey.
yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
will, dude. It's good to have you on here finally. So you have a YouTube channel, Sawbriar Outdoors.
That's right.
And I don't know if that's how I first heard about you, but we have a lot of mutual friends. Like we were talking about Lyle Gilbert, Hound
Yeah.
Street Game
Oh,
Calls.
yeah.
Do you have a call with them?
Yeah, I
Sawbriar?
do. It's called the Sawbriar, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's sick. That's
Yeah,
a
you
good
need
call,
to-
man.
You need
I like
to try it out. It's
So you got your YouTube channel, and you're really well known on your channel for bow hunting, and especially your movement into traditional archery.
right, yeah.
How long have you been doing traditional archery?
Oh, me, probably 8 years or so, something like that.
Okay,
So, yeah.
so I'm excited to talk about that. It's going to be a good bow hunting discussion for everybody. But to kick us off, what was your introduction into deer hunting, and how did you learn how to deer hunt?
Okay, yeah. So, started off in hunting, in small game hunting, which you probably hear that a good bit from guys, but that's just kind of what we did growing up. And when I was 15, I started working on a farm, and a big privately owned farm, and the guy that was like the head farm manager was just a deer killing machine. You know, it still is. He's a heck of a woodsman, and just one of those guys that you heard the term, he's mad at him, you know. Yeah, he's still mad at him, but he then he was, I guess, probably in his prime, and was getting after it, and really kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot, man, so much. And I worked with him for through college, but while we were working together, we started bow hunting. He got me into bow hunting, bow fishing, all that kind of stuff. And we hunted public land, and we hunted 5 or 6 days a week. I mean, it was hard hunting, grinding it, you know. And back then, where I grew up, there just wasn't a ton of deer, you know. So you come back to the truck with blood on your fletchings, you know, you were the man, you know. So, but it was a lot of fun. We learned a lot. I learned a lot, and it was really, I don't want to say a crash course, but more of an apprenticeship, you know. Like he taught me how to. I'll never forget him taking me to a chestnut oak and showing me, hey, here's what it looks like when deer are feeding on an acorn tree. You know, here's what you need to look for. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, and it just clicked instantly with me. And I'm like, this is awesome. So we were able to take that kind of knowledge and get out there and stomp around on the management area and just have a whole lot of fun. And that was my intro to bow hunting. And you know, after that, moved over to Tuscaloosa and went to college there. Roll Tide. And started hunting public land there. You know, and a couple little private tracks, but. I felt like I kind of upgraded a little bit as far as deer numbers. There was some more deer there. And then after college, met some buddies there in college and learned about the black belt and started hunting down there. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I thought I upgraded. Now it's like, you know, there's deer everywhere. So, yeah, that's where things really started, you know, turning up.
So you said that guy's a woodsman, and he taught you woodsmanship. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by he was a woodsman?
Yeah, so being able to get in the woods and find deer sign, to know the trees, to know the plants, to know how deer move through the landscape, how they use the terrain, how they where they bed, where they feed, where they travel, how they smell you, all those kind of things, learning and kind of backing up as a young kid. I've always been passionate about the outdoors. I want to be in the woods 24/7. That's just who I am. And my parents got great parents, and they picked up on that pretty quick and encouraged me and got me into like Boy Scouts and 4-H and archery classes and all those kind of things that really just, my whole hunting career has been an accumulation of taking what I've learned from people like that guy that I was telling you about. I'll keep names out of it, but that taught me, and guys that taught me archery and guys that taught me woodsmanship and kind of putting all those things together. And, I owe those guys, man, so much. They built the foundation for me and poured into me. And that's, it's got me where I'm at now. So.
What is the story of your first year you ever killed with a bow?
So first year I ever killed with a bow was over in Sumter County, I believe it was. I think I was 15, and I was hunting with a compound at the time, good old Muzzy Broadhead, and hunting a big food plot. I had a string of does come out. There was, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them, and one of them finally got right out there at about 30 yards, and I shot and hit the deer. Somehow I hit her in the shoulder. It was a doe, and the arrow went, I was from a tree stand, the arrow went in the shoulder and came out up to the neck. I don't know how it did that, but it kind of ricocheted off the shoulder or whatever. But, deer runs out there. I heard it crash, and guys come to get me. They're like, well, where'd it go? When you get down, early on, I didn't know to mark a spot where the deer ran out of the field. And he was like, you sure you hit this thing? I'm like, I'm telling you, man, it was buried up to the fletching. She's down. We finally found it, but that was a good lesson to learn. Things look different when you get down out of that tree, so you better make you a mental mark. Mm. So, yeah, from then on, man, I was hooked. I was hooked. Hook, line, and sinker.
I like to ask guys who are big bow hunters about early season, especially because, bow season, that's early season. And most guys around here, we call it bow hunt to get to gun season. And I know you rifle hunt some because I've seen you kill deer on your channel with a rifle. But when it comes to that early bow season, what's your go-to? Are you a feed tree guy or what?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. That's my bread and butter. I'm scouting the acorns in September and sometimes even earlier, but I'm going to know what trees have them, what trees don't, and, the longer you hunt a place, you kind of know those certain trees, and I'll go check them and that sort of thing. But yeah, you put me in some hardwoods with acorns dropping, and that's just where I want to be. That's my comfort zone, Now I'll also hunt some creek crossings and stuff. I like that. And travel corridors, maybe on a year that don't have a good mass crop, or you just need something else to mix into the deal. I really like those creek crossings, so that's a lot of fun.
Man, okay, so I kind of want to go deep into this.
Yeah.
These last 2 seasons have been polar opposites when it comes to acorns, and that was 2 years ago. It was a bust year, at least where I was. There was nothing. Last year was the absolute opposite. It was like a biblical mast year, and it was just everywhere. Yeah. What was your approach to those 2 years? So on the bust year, how did you do? And then last year, what was your go-to?
Yeah, so on a bust year, on a year of slim mast, honestly, I feel like your success rate's higher. Mine is. And if you'll burn enough boot leather, you'll find the deer, right? And usually when you find them, they're concentrated. Last year, we were tripping on acorns in turkey season. Yeah. I was finding deer feeding on acorns in turkey season. There was just, I've never seen anything like it. I've seen some good acorn crops, but last year, it takes the cake. Last year, I felt myself kind of chasing my tail a little bit, because there were so many places that I'd scouted that had good food on the ground, but the sign was just not as concentrated, so I feel like I hadn't looked at the data, but I want to say our state's numbers were down overall as far as harvest records, which, makes a lot of sense, especially, the guys that were hunting over bait, which is now legal, and I think that they probably weren't seeing the success maybe as much because there was so much food in the woods. Didn't really change what I did from an overall perspective. I'm still hunting acorns, but it was just, it was a little more scattered, as far as the sightings go.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I always like asking that because I had the exact opposite. 2 years ago, I couldn't buy a deer. Like, it was bad. Last year, I had a good year, though.
Okay.
And I don't know why. I think it might be because the place I'm hunting, there's not that many oak trees on it to begin with. And so they all had acorns in them last year.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, if you just go down to that creek bottom, that's where they're at,
Yeah.
But when it comes to, like, let's say that somebody's planning their early season right now, and they're excited about bow season, they want to get out and start off on the right foot. What do? You said you go and you scout oak trees right now. So what's your process? Are you just going out into just hardwood bottoms and just glassing up into trees and seeing if you can see the acorns, or what?
Kind of. I'm a little more strategic on that, and when you think about oak trees, like right here where we live, the first tree to drop is going to be the chestnut oak. You hear them called mountain oaks. You get in those steep hills of some of these local management areas, would be a great place to find them. But real big acorns, and a chestnut oak is going to be really rough, rugged terrain, but that's going to be the first tree that drops. And usually they're going to be yellow when they drop. And usually they're going to be October 1st, there's going to be deer eating those things. And that's where I'm going to start. All right, so once those things kind of start working on into, depending on where you're at in the state, right, or in the southeast, but your white oak's going to be next, okay? So right after those mountain oaks, a lot of people will say, well, you can't kill deer on that. Deer walk right past them. And that's true in a sense. When there's other more preferred food sources, that is true. But that first couple of weeks, you're missing out if you're not on those things. And it's the most obvious sign that you'll ever find under an acorn tree. And if you think about it, kind of dialing back to my guy that showed me that first acorn tree, it was a chestnut oak, right? And big acorns, big caps, big holes. They leave a lot of sign on the ground when they feed under them. And with it being the first tree that drops, it's concentrated. Okay, so that's a really good early season ticket right there. And those are the easiest ones to find with your binoculars, And usually if you're getting out there in late September, early October, you'll probably already start finding a few of those acorns on the ground. So that's my first, and then I'll be prepared for those. I'll be prepared for the white oaks next, because usually right in here, opening day of bow season, usually mid-October, those white oaks start dropping. Halloween, that's a magic time for those white oaks. That first week in November, that's where I want to be if there are white oaks available, which it looks like we're going to have some this year too. So I don't know. I can't tell you if it's going to be like it was last year yet, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm moving into red oaks, water oaks, which I'll probably tell you is my favorite later in the year. So, and then you've probably seen, I think I've got a video or two on my channel of hunting those December and January, even red oaks and water oaks.
On the mountain oaks, we've interviewed a lot of different guys, and this is the fun thing about doing this podcast, all the different opinions that you hear.
Oh yeah.
And man, there's a lot of guys who are great deer hunters, much better deer hunters than I am, who are like they don't eat those. Like, they'll walk past them, don't even pay attention to them at all. But that buck that I missed last year, the recurve bow, that's what they were going to. They were going to a mountain oak. And then they were feeding on it really hard. And it's still burned into my brain. So when I found that heavy feed sign, like what you're talking about, I was like, is there a different tree dropping right here?
Yeah.
And I put a camera on it. No, that's what they were feeding on. And then the white oaks, there's 3 or 4 white oaks about 150 yards down the drain. Those started dropping, and they switched.
That's right.
Just like that.
Yeah.
When you're looking for that feed sign, are you just looking for that feed sign, or are you trying to find buck sign associated with those feed trees as well?
I'm looking for deer sign. I'm not necessarily trying to dial in and hunt a specific buck or anything. But I'll tell you this, a lot of times early in the season, if there's a bachelor group using a specific feed tree, there's going to be rubs around it. And you can just about count on it. So if those bucks are still together, they just got rid of their velvet, testosterone's starting to come into play, they're standing around, they're feeding, there's 4 or 5 of them feeding under an oak tree. One of them gets over there and gets on a sapling, then they're tickling their horns, and another one gets over here. So you're going to see some of that, and even some scrapes early sometimes, And, when I do see that, that one kind of goes on up the list, but I'm not necessarily going out looking for that, so to speak. I'm checking for food sources and looking for deer sign.
Yeah.
I want to get more into like the scouting aspect of the strategicness for feed trees, as in different terrain and like different terrain types, like from flatlands or rolling hills to a little bit steeper terrain. When you're scouting for specific trees and you're just looking for acorns, like you were talking about earlier, at least with the mountain oaks, chestnut oaks that you're glassing for them, how are you either through an app or in your mind cataloging where you're finding mass, especially like this year, a lot of trees I've seen so far seems like they're carrying mass. Especially I've seen quite a few red oaks that's got quite a bit of production on them. But how are you cataloging in your mind where you're finding them, and then how are you going back through checking them as we get closer to season or in season of what your threshold from like say 1 to 10 different spots, or how you put in your hierarchy of the areas you want to go back into versus ones you're going to wait a little bit longer to go back and check?
Yep, great question. So what I'll do is I'll start starting the scouting process. I'll start in the high terrain. All right, so I'm gonna start up in the hills because that's where your mountain oaks are, and that's where your white oaks are. They're going to be kind of the next ones down the ridge, right? And then where your water oaks going to be, they're going to be down in the creek bottoms. So kind of working myself down as the season progresses. Swamp chestnuts, if you got those are going to be kind of down in there in that Halloween time frame. But wind direction is a huge part of that, right? So if I'm looking at say my app, and whether it's Onyx or whatever, then okay, if I know, say it's the 3rd week of bow season, right? We're getting close to the end of October, and the deer probably moved off of the chestnut oaks at this point. They're probably eating white oaks, and they're probably going to be on those mild ridges, is what I would say. So then I'll go start looking at that and be like, okay, well, I'm going to be that's the class that I'm going to focus on, class of oaks, and then I'll start thinking wind direction. That's going to eliminate, maybe 40%, and then all of a sudden we're kind of dialing that thing into sign.
Do you ever take in consideration, and I'm thinking more so in areas like around here where you have a lot of pine trees and thickets, clear cuts with SMZs that have like these drainages that have oaks throughout them. Some are more isolated than others. Do you ever take in consideration from a scouting standpoint and or hunting potential how close that feed tree is to good cover? Or is it just whichever tree that you're finding is producing, saying they're all producing, but is it just whichever one has the hottest sign on it is kind of just going to be the top of your list when you're coming through like scouting right when you're getting into season?
Yeah, no, I probably should have led with that cover. I mean, bedding cover, we got to get close to where they're living, right, if we're going to catch them coming to feed. So if you can find that one big isolated white oak 100 yards off of a 8-year-old pine thicket, that's going to be hard to beat. If it's dropping and the wind's right, that's where I want to be right there. Same goes for any oak species, or any food source. You got to get close to that bed and cover. That's just, and around here where I typically hunt, that's going to be thickets, old cutovers, most of the time.
Also, another thing from scouting, I think about this from an old conversation we had with my uncle in the podcast. He loves, based off how he's hunted the last 40 years, isolated white oaks. for early into mid bow season in and around really good cover. And some properties, public or private, have more isolated oaks than others. Some you just have a lot more expanse. Like there's some public land I hunt, it's a lot more expansive oaks. Andrew was talking about, I think last year, scouting on the club that he's in, I just joined with him. There's certain areas inside the pines you have isolated white oaks or isolated red oaks inside that, where it's not like a big cluster. It is truly like one or two trees with really good cover, super tight to it. Have you, when it comes to like the scouting aspect, and I'm sure that's something that's probably high up on the list, at least something worth checking out, is it truly just boots on the ground, or is any of this you find through like aerial imagery where like you can just see the differential between the treetops? Like, I need to go check that out. It might be in a pine, like a 15-year-old pine stand, but I need to go see what that looks like versus just walking creek drainages or any place where we're going to find oaks, because there's not very many oaks, at least on public land, up in elevation, and even some private land because a lot of it's been cut out.
An isolated oak by itself, maybe that got left during a timber cut, right, and it grew up pine thicket around it, you got to check it, right, because who knows what it might be. Sometimes that isolated oak may be out in a cow pasture, right, and it's real thick next door. It's out there. An oak tree has to have sunlight, right? If you get one that's competing in a forest, not all trees are going to be equal, right? There's going to be that one tree that's doing better. If that tree, if the canopy is getting a whole lot of sunlight and it's getting a lot of nutrients, like on the edge of a field that's getting fertilized or a cow pasture or something, those are trees that you really want to key in on. Those are the kind of the outliers that I would think of. Other than that, using aerial imagery, I think is a good way to quickly narrow down, especially looking at some new property. That would be a quick way to dial into it.
All right, if you enjoy this channel, I'm going to tell you about something that you're really going to enjoy, and that is the Southern Outdoorsman Circle community. Our Circle community is a place where you can go deeper on the topics we discuss on the show. You can learn more. You can bounce ideas off fellow members. We've got members all over the country, so when you join up, there's probably some guys local to you, which makes it an excellent place to find new hunting buddies and get recommendations on gear, map scouting, your hunting tactics that you're using throughout the season. And it's also just a good hangout. It kind of functions almost like a forum and a Facebook group and a group chat rolled all into one. So like I said, if you're wanting to go deeper, learn more, and connect with like-minded hunters, join our Circle account. There's a link down in the description where you can join up for free today and give it a try. So we're having a great time with it. We'll see y'all over on the Circle account. Y'all hit the link in the description and go join today. If you want to get a head start on deer season, you can go out and you can actually scout feed trees in summer. This is something we've been talking about on the podcast quite a bit lately. Today I'm out here, I've got a pair of Vortex Viper HDs. This is a great pair of binoculars for this. And what we're doing is we're just looking up into these oak trees, looking to see if we can see the little acorn buds on the limbs. So as summer goes on, it's going to get easier and easier to see those buds as they get larger. A tip for that is when you're looking up in the tree, you want to find a limb that's daylighted. It's just nothing but daylight behind it. You're looking at an isolated limb, and you're just going to want to pick that thing apart with a good pair of binos like these that are clear. I like to use a trekking pole and actually brace the binos on the trekking pole and sit down underneath that tree and really look at it for a while. So if you want to get a head start scouting feed trees this summer, go get you a pair of Vortex binoculars. One thing we talk about with almost every guest on this show is map scouting. My favorite map scouting tool is LiDAR. If you're unfamiliar, LiDAR is basically like a 3D scan of the Earth's surface. I like to say it kind of takes away all the surprises. LiDAR is now available on onX Hunt on their topography map. If you go to your app right now, click on the topography map, you can flip on that LiDAR feature and boom, it's going to come on and you're going to see what I'm talking about. The LiDAR is going to allow you to see things that are normally hidden from view. This might be ditches, bends in creeks, rocks, old road beds. I personally love old road beds because deer like to walk them. They're great places to find scrapes. They're great camera locations. And before, an old roadbed or an old logging road might be something that you kind of happen upon while you're out scouting or hunting. Well, now with the LiDAR, before I go into an area, I can turn on that LiDAR and I can see exactly where those roadbeds are. Even old logging roads from the 1930s, you can still see them on there. So that allows me to go straight to those spots and check them out. It's just an incredibly helpful tool, and it's available now on onX Hunt. And hey, if you want to get 20% off your onX Elite membership, you can use the promo code SOUTHERN. Like I said, it's going to save you 20%. Go check out that LiDAR feature. You'll be glad you did. Know where you stand with onX Hunt. So if you hunt anywhere in the South, you are well aware of the fact that our temperature changes
rapidly throughout the season. On any given day in November here in Alabama, it might be 80 degrees or it might be 40 degrees. You never know. For that reason, I like merino wool. Y'all have probably heard about merino wool over these last couple years as it's become more popular. The benefit of merino wool is that it's naturally temperature regulating. So that means those mornings in the deep south where it's really cold in the morning and then it gets kind of warm through the afternoon, that merino wool will keep you warm in the morning, but then it'll continue to wick away moisture throughout the day as you warm up so you don't end up getting hot. Another benefit of merino wool is it's naturally odor resistant. So it's not going to start stinking after a day or two. You can wear it multiple days in a row without having to wash it, which is especially helpful when you're on a hunting trip somewhere and maybe you're camping and you don't have access to a washing machine. I've tried a lot of different merino wool shirts in the past, and an issue I've always had is durability, especially romping around out in these briars all over the place here in Alabama. This shirt that I've got on is a Mossy Oak Woodsman Series merino shirt, and I've had it for about a year and a half now, so I've put 2 turkey seasons and 1 deer season on this shirt so far, and it's still in great shape. I haven't managed to rip a giant hole in it, and it's not disintegrating off of me. So I've been very, very impressed with the durability of this shirt. Of course, it's merino, so it's got all the benefits of merino, and it comes in everybody's favorite camo, Bottomland. So if you want to try out one of these Woodsman merino shirts from Mossy Oak, you can head on over to the Mossy Oak store and use the code TSOP15 for a discount. Again, that's TSOP15 for a discount. Y'all make sure to use the discount because you're going to get a discount and it helps us out.
So we all know that excess noise can ruin a hunt before it gets started. And you might think that that's just you being loud walking through the woods, but you crunching leaves or maybe breaking a couple twigs isn't necessarily what ruins a hunt. Those are pretty natural sounds. What ruins a hunt before it gets started are man-made unnatural sounds, like metal on metal contact, things rolling around and bumping together in your backpack, pieces of your gear getting snagged on vegetation and accidentally ripping a vine down out of a tree or something. It's just those unnatural sounds of both man-made objects like metal, but also pulling your way through brush. Because of that, I try to be very meticulous about how I pack all my gear on my backpack. I've tried a lot of different methods of organizing my gear in the past, and the best one I've found so far is the new Flyer Pack from Latitude Outdoors. For me, what makes this system so effective are these torque straps that are built right into the backpack. A lot of us have used these torque straps in the past to secure our gear, and they work great, but they've always been a separate purchase, you know, that you go and get at some store and then you tie your gear up with it. Well, these are integrated right into the pack frame. That does 2 things for you. Number one, it makes it super fast and easy to use them, and you can't lose them, which is great because I lose stuff all the time. But secondly, you can get your gear super snug on this pack, so it is not gonna move. It just makes for a more quiet, more comfortable walk into the woods when your gear is secured on your pack and you're not walking around feeling like you got a turtle shell on your back and everything's hanging off of you. If you want to check out the Flyer Pack and everything else that Latitude offers for us mobile hunters, head on over to latitudeoutdoors.com and check it out.
Also, from a scouting standpoint, as you're picking everything apart and you kind of walk us through a little bit of your process, how are you taking consideration stand location? You already mentioned a little bit about one direction, but like stand location and entrance and exit, getting to some of these spots that, you know, when they produce the signs there, you think you have the best odds of success getting in clean and be able to get a shot off and so on.
Yes. Ooh, man, that's a great question. Stand selection, I'm going to be on the downwind side, right? I'm mobile 90-something% of the time. You know, I'm hunting out of a little small lock-on, and I can put myself where I need to be. Entry and exit is a whole nother topic. You know, there's so many times that I find what I think is a slam dunk, but your entry or exit is just subpar. And there's sometimes you just can't really effectively hunt a place because getting in there, you're going to blow it out. So sometimes what you can do is, instead of going in right at daylight, slide in there at 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, and hunt that late morning deal. Sometimes you got to get in there like at 12:30 because they're coming through there early afternoon, you know, whatever it is. Sometimes you have to kind of think outside the box on entry and exit, I feel like, to maybe get a hunt in a place where you couldn't before.
So on that same subject, and then we're going to get to the timing of deer feeding on some of these trees, because I think a lot of people, when they think of feed trees, they think the last 30 minutes of light in the afternoon. But side note, before we get into that conversation, can you give us a scenario or situation that you've had in the past where you found one of those slam dunk spots, but because of how you analyze it, like there's just no way to get in or out clean or cleanish. And maybe a situation where you've run across that to kind of paint the picture for an audience member of like when they find something like this, like, is it even huntable, to be able to get in there?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a place right now that, I'm trying to think how to portray this, but walking in, sometimes you don't learn that until after you try to hunt it, right? You going in the morning, you're all excited, you're jacked up. Maybe it's even 30 minutes before daylight, but you're blowing deer out. You hear them running and snorting off. Then you got to do something different, right? I had an old guy tell me one time, he said, look, if you're blowing deer out in the morning, go back in the evening, because they're in there before you get there. Try it in the afternoon, and a lot of times just that little switch up right there can get you in the game. Usually it's those places where something to look for is what I in my mind call night beds, where the deer get out at night and they do their thing, they're milling around, they're feeding, but then what they'll do is they'll lay down, and then they'll wait and get up and feed a little bit early, right at that crack of daylight time or whatever, and then, ease off into bedding. And you'll find places like maybe a doe group where there's 6 or 8 different beds in a place that they're not spending the day there, right? They were there laying down at some point, but that's not their primary bedding, right? So if you're finding those beds around a feed tree, then you probably can just about guess that they're going to be in there at night laid up, and you're probably going to blow them out in the morning going in. So in my mind, when I see that, that's going to be an afternoon spot for me.
Oh man, that's good.
That
is good.
Write that one down.
Right, that. Well, and that kind of goes into the conversation of timing of hunting feed trees, especially in bow season, early bow season, because again, I think a lot of people, when they hear that, talk about hunting feed trees, you think it's an afternoon thing. You don't hunt them in the morning and so on. One of our good friends who's hunted similar ground of where you've hunted as well, our buddy Scott Seals, he has, and he talks about it, he's like, he has much more success specifically killing bucks and bachelor groups that mid to late morning time period.
Yeah.
And getting in 45 minutes, an hour after daylight and slipping into the spot after they've kind of drifted out and then setting up. And he's like, they're going to come back probably before noon and feed again. And most people, they're only hunt for a few hours in the morning if they do hunt early season. Then they're bouncing out and they're coming back the last 2 hours before dark. First off, when you first got into bow hunting and like your mentor you talked about earlier on that was hunting feed trees, was that something he showed you about, like you could have success in the morning, or did you learn that on your own over, years of doing it?
Some of both. That deer that we were just talking about earlier over here, I shot that deer at 10 o'clock in the morning on a water oak, and it was in December. And the tree was showing really good sign. There was a hardwood bottom there, a pretty good draw, and it had some white oaks, but they had already played out because we're in December now. And there was 2 big water oaks, and they were dropping, and there was 1 rub in there. And it was a pretty good sized rub, and I feel like, it's like, I know there's one around, and I went in early, and nothing happened. And I'm sitting there, and it's like 9:30, and it's like, I'm thinking about Jack's going to get me a biscuit, and I'm like, no, I know I'm in the right spot. I got a good wind. I'm just going to hang out. And like 10:15, I look up, and here he comes, just strolls right in there, and not a care in the world, just relaxed, doing his thing, and kind of caught me off guard because, you're not thinking that at 10 o'clock in the morning, but that deer was on route to go somewhere, and he's stopping by that feed tree on his way to bed probably, and gave me a good opportunity. So yeah, that late morning stuff, man, can be overlooked. And I feel like, especially, we've all been there. You're hunting early in the morning and it's just dead, right? There's no wind, especially here in Alabama. You get a lot of those just stagnant days. But about 8:30, 9 o'clock, the wind starts blowing, and you start getting ready for that biscuit like we were talking about. That's when I've learned you better be on your A game. When the wind starts blowing, that's when the deer get to moving. And I always look forward to that time. So I feel like there's a lot of times where I get out there and I may be there for 2 hours of unproductive time that I could probably just sleep in and get out there at 8 o'clock. Because when it's real dead calm like that, especially when the leaves start getting gone, those deer know they're making a lot of noise walking through the woods, right? And those crispy, crunchy leaves, you can hear them coming for 100 yards. Well, they know all their predators can hear them and see them and, know their presence. But when that wind's blowing, how many times you're sitting there and you're kind of drifting off in your mind, hadn't seen anything, and then you look over and there's one right there. The wind masked the noise of that deer coming in. And after that happens to you enough times, you get caught off guard, you start realizing, okay, there's something to this. So in my mind, when the wind starts blowing, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, whatever it is, I feel like that's when a lot of times you better be ready.
Now, and that's something, is that just kind of like in that December time period, or is that something like all bow season, even early bow season? You still see that?
Yeah, I think all bow season, really all season. But I think more so when the leaves fall off the trees. When you get around early November and the leaves start changing, then when they fall off the trees, your deer patterns they change almost overnight. And I believe that you can kind of get ahead of that, and you quit seeing deer where you were seeing deer, right? Where you were seeing them early season in the big open hardwoods, all of a sudden they're not comfortable there during daylight hours near as much. So you better start changing the game a little bit.
That's where I see like the whole idea of like a couple of isolated red oaks kind of tucked in real tight to that cover. It's like, and especially by the time they start dropping, leaves starting to fall off the tree, really be super productive there versus that 150 yards away, little white oak bottom or something like that kind of dries up a little bit during daylight sign. You just might need to shift just a little bit to get back into the deer.
That's right.
Yeah, I keep bringing it back to this area I was hunting last year just because it's fresh on my mind. But I wanted to ask about the pressure aspect when you're hunting these different areas. So when I had all these hunts last early season in this one drainage, and that's where I shot at the buck, had some opportunities at does in there. And I think it was probably like the 5th or 6th time that I sat in there that I got a shot at that buck. And I'm curious about how you kind of keep tabs on your feed trees. Like, so you'll scout them in August, September, see which ones actually produce so you have a mental note. But then I'm assuming you got to go back in and check those before you hunt them, or maybe while you're going in to hunt, you check them. How do you deal with not over pressuring those spots where you find that money spot, you're close to cover, you got the buck sign, you got the feed sign? How do you know how often you can hunt that spot without really blowing it out? And also, sorry to keep adding to the question, but like that feed tree will only be good for a certain amount of time, right? So it's like if you find it and then you're not going to hunt it for a week and a half, like there's no guarantee it'll still be good. So I'm just wondering how you deal with that.
Yep, great question. All right, so let's start with scouting, all right? I'm always scouting, always. It doesn't stop when season comes in, but you've got to be more strategic, because if not, you're just putting scent all through the woods. My favorite time to scout is right before rain. So if I know that there's a rain coming, even if it's during the middle of season, usually right before that rain, it's undesirable hunting conditions anyway. So if I know it's going to rain this afternoon, well, this morning, I'm out going scouting because I feel like I get a kind of a free pass. The rain's going to wash my scent away, right? So I get to go in there and creep around and do my scouting, knowing that unless he comes in there right before it rains, there's a good chance that they're never going to know I was there, or I have a pretty good chance that they're not going to know I was there. So scouting during season, right before rain, it's a big deal to me. That's what I like to do, and that's a way to kind of jump the shark, and to get a leg up on them. Now there's times, to the other side of your question, where sometimes you miss out on a tree that you're really excited to hunt because maybe you were hunting somewhere else, or you couldn't get the wind right in the time frame that tree was at its prime dropping. You couldn't get the conditions to line up for you to get in there, and sometimes you miss out. But and then different oaks have a different drop cycle, Okay, so that chestnut oak or a white oak, ooh, it's a short window, of time that it's dropping, and even a shorter window of prime time. But something like a water oak, it may drop for a couple months or more, So carrying your binoculars with you all the time in season scouting, you can look up there and see, okay, well, this tree, this big white oak that I've been seeing a lot of deer on, there's only a few dozen acorns left up there. It's on its way out. It's either time to move on or get what you can get and then go. But kind of keeping up with that. And then while you're hunting, you can sit there and glass the acorns around and you'll kind of get the feel for, this is about to play out. It's time for me to move on or whatever.
You also mentioned too during early season that you like to hunt not only feed trees but creek crossings and travel corridors. Mm-hmm. What's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, catching deer going back to bed is pretty solid. They're going to go lay down in something thick, right? Mm-hmm. So wherever they are at night, which in today's world they're probably eating corn in somebody's corn pile somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then they're headed back to bed, right? And there's probably going to be a stop or two along the way that you can intercept those deer. So creek crossings is a great spot to pinch deer down. When we're talking bow hunting and specifically traditional bow hunting, we need them close, right? So a creek crossing is a great way to get them tight. Terrain features, saddles, a great way. Ridges, mm-hmm. That kind of stuff. And I feel like, I'll tell you this little nugget. I've been hunting creek crossings a good bit for the past several years, and you got to watch those things because the deer can smell you real good in those creek crossings. I don't know. I guess it's because your scent settles down around that water, but I can think of several hunts that were just fixing to be a slam dunk, and then the deer just freak out when they get close to that water. So I've learned to kind of back off of them a little bit. You may have seen where I shot one last year right there in the creek crossing, but most of the time I'm going to try to back off of it some, and I've learned that kind of the hard way.
Yeah. Are you, well, I'm sorry.
Well, let's just go with it. When you say back off, are you backing like one way up or down the creek, or are you backing truly like off the creek?
Off the creek.
The creek, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I'll tell you a story. I had a really nice mature buck. He was I think he was like a 7-point, but big, heavy, probably 5-year-old deer or whatever, coming straight to a white oak or a little group of white oaks, and just a great creek crossing. He comes down, he gets in the water, and we just had a big rain come through. He's up to his belly in water, and he's like 5 yards right here, and I'm like, oh boy, and I'm about to pop him. He's here, white oak's here. He's got to come right under me. And this thing winds in my face, all right? And he just locks up in the water and spins around and jumps and runs out of there. I'm like, you're kidding. The wind's right in my face. What went wrong? Everything was perfect. And I'm convinced that there's something about that water that helps them pick you off, man. I don't know if the scent settles in that, and that's the lowest point, right? So if it's that or if it's something to do with the water, but I've had that happen enough times that I'm backing off the creek a little bit, maybe 50 yards.
I wonder if it's the humidity.
Well, I'm curious about this too. In that circumstance where he was crossing at, is that upstream or downstream of the tree, or as in the flow of the water too?
I mean, he was coming dead perpendicular across the creek,
Yeah. Which way was the water flowing from? Like in front of you coming down? Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Okay.
And so was the wind. So was the wind. Wind and the water were both going this way.
Oh god.
Yeah, I could already taste his backstrap. He's like, "Nope, I'm out." What do you do?
Gosh. Oh, that's tough.
Yeah. That's a heartbreaker.
Yeah, it is. But
that makes sense, because we've had guys, and plenty of guys talk about using thermals to their advantage down those creeks and getting the flow of the water kind of dragging it off. But most that's never necessarily with a creek crossing. It's more so them paralleling the creek or like working the creek down to like get back to a bedding area. That's Dude, that's tough. I mean, like you said, he's right there.
Oh man, like you could count the whiskers on him, you know.
For this quick funny story and let Andrew keep going, I had a situation on some public land. This is 12 years ago. It had 3 bobcats come in. I'd never seen more than 1 bobcat at once ever. It seemed like 2 males fighting over a female. And I'm like, I'm about to, dude, they were right now. I mean, 10 yards from me, like just fighting and going back and forth. Drew back, and I'm like, I was already thinking about how I was going to get this sucker mounted.
Yeah.
I drew back, and I settled my pen on, and like they're moving a little bit, and all of a sudden they stood still. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh, how am I going to get them posed? I shoot right over the top of this bobcat, and they stop and they look around, and then not come to find out. At that point, I only had 1 arrow with me.
Okay.
So I sat there. Hey, listen, I'm a broke college kid. Listen, I broke my arrows. I had 1 good shooting broadhead arrow. Anyways, so I sat there, and I'm like,
I got 1 bullet.
Dude, they just kept walking around and like looking up at me and kept walking around. And finally, they walked off, and I had to climb down, grab my arrow, and climb back up. I almost shot a doe after that with the same arrow. But anyway, talk about like thinking you have it in the bag and it doesn't work out.
Well, that's just bow hunting. You know? I mean, it's like, especially with a traditional bow, everything has to be perfect. And there's so many times, man, I could tell you stories and stories of the ones that just didn't work out. You know, you add the video camera to that mix, and it starts to be a low percentage game, you know?
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah, I almost, the first hunt last year, we were in Georgia hunting early season feed trees with our buddy Greg, and I had our camera guy Caden with me, and these does came in just, I mean, perfect, exactly how you want them to, like 9 yards broadside, and got busted trying to draw. And but it's nice having Caden with me because I can blame it on him. Because, dude, you moved. I do think he wrote that for me. Caden, he's probably watching this because back in the footage when it happened, he's like, "Oh, dude, she saw you trying to draw." Well, I went back and looked at the footage, and Caden's behind the tree in a saddle, and the camera comes out. And when that camera comes out, that doe's like looks straight at him. So it's the camera guy's fault.
Yeah.
Anyways, so are you a big trail guy? Like, do you like hunting trail intersections or anything like that? Because when you say you're coming off of a creek crossing and you're trying to get off of the creek, that's kind of what I'm picturing in my head. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. So those trails, you know, trails can be tough. They can fool you. You know, you can see a trail and think, man, every deer in the country's coming down this thing. And it can be slow hunting trails, real slow at times, depending on where they're going, where they're coming from, what they're doing. But if, like, for example, if I'm hunting a creek crossing, it's going to be a main creek crossing or I'm not going to be there. So that trail is going to be a dynamite trail if I'm hunting it. Now, you get a situation where you may have 2 or 3 trails run together. That increases your odds. One trail, man, you can waste a lot of tree stand hours on one trail, and I believe if you put a trail camera there, that'll tell you, you know, just what you are getting.
Speak about trails and creek crossings, and it also goes in the feed side. I still have some more questions about feed trees, but when you're looking at like a creek crossing or a trail intersection, anything like that, is there any way for you to have confidence without implementing a trail camera that like this, I could kill a deer on this spot based off sign, like tracks and everything?
On a trail?
On a trail, creek crossing, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, I'm not a huge trail camera guy, right? I got like 3 of them, and I'll use them, but most of the time when I do use them, I'm not putting them like on a bait pile or something. Most of the time I'm putting them on a trail, like on a creek crossing or maybe a scrape or something like that. But if you see the right sign, you don't need a trail camera. You know, I don't feel like you need one to be successful. I feel like, you know, back in the day we didn't have them. You know, we hunted deer sign. That's how I learned to hunt. And I mean, we started having them, but they were not what they are now. They were the old 35 millimeter, and you know, one crow takes all your pictures, and that's all you got. But anyway, putting the trail camera thing aside, I mean, if you know what to look for, and you find the right sign, that's all I need to know. And I like it better that way because the anticipation is so much more, not knowing what is probably going to come down that trail or through that creek crossing. I'd rather not know. I'd rather just read the sign and sit there and let my imagination, you know, run wild of the big 12 point that's fixing to walk it right in my lap, you know.
Me and you are cut from the same cloth. Travis Murray talked about that. The guy we talked about earlier before we got started recording, Mississippi traditional archer, bow hunter. He used to run trail cameras a lot, was super effective, like early on, like to the point where like if he's like, I got a photo of this deer and backtracked him with the camera, I was going to kill that buck. And it took the fun out of it. Like, he killed some really, really big deer doing it. And it got to the point where it's like, it was too much work. He's like, I'm not enjoying it anymore. And I like the idea of truly not knowing exactly what's there. Like, I'm finding the sign. It tells me there's a really nice buck in the air, but I don't know what he looks like. And it's a lot more exciting when you see a buck, especially if it's something that you're willing to shoot, like that might be the one leaving the sign.
That's right.
And there is something to that. We get questioned about that sometimes too, because we do, a lot of our guests talk a lot about trail cameras. We talk a good bit about trail cameras too. But it's like, you don't have to have trail cameras to be successful, like at all. And it goes back to like the woodsmanship and sign reading and figuring out what sign looks the best for you. You still didn't answer my question about the creek crossings. What exactly about a creek crossing will tell you, like, hey, I've got a pretty good chance of killing a deer, buck or doe. And maybe if you're trying to hunt a specific or hunt a buck, is it just tracks? Is it how worn out it is? Is it location between bedding and cover and food? What about it kind of tells you like, hey, I could have success on this creek crossing versus the one that's 150 yards down the creek?
Yeah. So in an ideal situation, what I want to find is a place where a deer has limited places that he will cross. Okay, so like one I'm thinking about right now is kind of a bulletproof deal, but well, not bulletproof, but it's a high percentage trail, creek crossing trail, and there's not another crossing for 350 yards this way and maybe 250 yards the other way, you know, and even then those other ones aren't as good as this one, right? So another area I'm thinking of, there's not another creek crossing for maybe 300 or 400 yards, you know. So when you and that's due to terrain, right? So real steep creek banks, you got a bluff that's 8 feet tall, you know, creek bank like that, and then all of a sudden a draw comes in, and all of a sudden you've got maybe a 4-foot creek bank that's got a natural depression, and all kind of critters are crossing that, not just deer, you know, anything that's wanting to go from point A to point B, right? So maybe it's a bedding thicket on this side of the creek that's where the deer are coming out of, and they're, you know, crossing this creek to get into an oak flat, or maybe a food plot that they're headed to, or some neighborhood with a corn pile a mile away, whatever it is. If you can kind of narrow down, like, I'm not interested in hunting a creek crossing where there's one here and then there's another one 100 yards, another one 75. I'll hunt something else, you know. But if you can find one where it's like all the critters in this area are either coming through this one or that one, you got a pretty good shot.
Okay.
Did that answer it a little better?
Yeah, that's perfect. No,
Okay.
that's because again, I've gone to a place, I'm sure a lot of audience members have seen this too, where you go to walk in some creeks, it's like every 50 to 75 yards is a trail crossing. There's a crossing.
Yeah.
And then you go to some areas, and like you said, it's just very few, but when you find them, they're completely worn out. And it's like you've got coyote tracks, you got coon tracks, you got deer tracks, you got all kinds of things that are working those specific points, but there's limited of them.
That's
and
right.
that makes more sense, a lot higher odds of success of catching a deer, buck or doe, whatever you want to shoot, crossing one of those versus the one they're up and down the whole stretch of the whole creek. That's
right. As a bow hunter, I need it, you know, narrowed down, but I want a high percentage thing. If there's a trail every 50 or 75 yards, that's a low percentage game.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions I have about with the setup that we're going to save for the archery conversation.
Okay.
You said you had more on feed trees?
Oh, yeah. You kind of threw me off earlier because you changed the creek crossings. Number one, and we haven't hit on this yet, and I really want us to kind of go in because I think this would be very helpful for audience members who don't have experience hunting feed trees is, first off, what does feed sign look like underneath an oak tree that's dropping, or persimmon, or any mass-producing tree, okay? What does it look like, and how does it need to look for you to feel confident sitting one?
Okay, that's a good question. And, you know, it's hard to put it into words more so than it is to show somebody. I've got some videos out there on my channel that you can check out that may give a better visual representation, but I'm looking for busted hulls. All right, so where they take the acorn, just like you and I eat sunflower seeds, right? We pop it open, get the goodie out, spit the seeds out. They're doing the same thing with the hull of the acorn, right? You'll see them laying all over the ground. They'll have teeth marks in them. And before I go any further, I mentioned earlier a chestnut oak is a whole lot easier to find sign on than other species because of that big acorn, right? There's big holes laying everywhere. You can mess up and walk past a hot water oak, but because they'll just suck them up like a vacuum cleaner. A lot of times, they're not leaving those big holes. They're not leaving as much sign. They don't have those big caps and big holes. So on a white oak or chestnut oak, swamp chestnut oak, shoe-marred oak, those you're going to find those busted holes laying around everywhere. But the number one is going to be deer droppings. If I don't have fresh deer droppings, I'm not hunting it. Now, last year, we talked about there was acorns everywhere. Places where you would normally find 6 or 8 piles of droppings, you'd find 1 or 2. So you kind of had to I had to readjust my thinking last year and hunt sign that wasn't as glaring obvious because there was so much food in the woods. But on an average year, I guess you would say, if you find a tree that's got a handful, 5, 6, 7 piles of droppings, you better get in a tree. And usually, go ahead.
I'm about to say fresh droppings, correct?
Yeah, well, you're going to find both stages. You're going to find some old droppings and some fresh ones. But I want fresh, wet droppings. That means that deer was there within the past 24 hours, right? He's probably coming every evening or every morning, every evening, or one of the two. Something. Their deer are coming there regularly, naturally. That's what they're doing. They're coming there to feed. If you've got a bunch of busted holes and you've got multiple piles of fresh droppings, it's hard to walk away from that. It's time to climb a tree.
All right, found what we're looking for. Here's a swamp chestnut oak. There's a few of them right here, and I don't know if you can hear that acorns falling right now. I'll show you. This is the holes. This is where they've been eating the acorns. You can actually see teeth marks, but you can find this stuff laying all over the ground. And I'll show you what else you can find. Deer droppings. You can see the ground really torn up. Some more droppings. As you can see, the ground's just demolished, and it looks to me like this is pretty fresh. And you see wet droppings like that, fresh busted holes that hadn't dried out yet, and the ground's just torn up, and it rained a couple days ago. So when you find a spot like this, all you gotta do is pick the right tree, get the wind right, pick the right tree, because they're coming. So I'm gonna figure out what tree to get in on the downwind side, and we're gonna see some deer this evening. Hopefully I can get one in close enough to get a shot with that recurve. So hang tight and we'll see what happens. But swamp chestnut, fresh droppings, fresh disturbance, fresh tracks. It's on. Here we go.
What about disturbance to the leaves? I know some guys talk about the tilled up ground, which maybe you could talk about different species, because I don't see that with water oaks. It's like the way the water oak leaf lays, it's perfectly flat. Acorn falls on top of it.
Yep.
It's a vacuum cleaner versus like a red oak or any of the white oaks where it's a little more lofty leaves. Acorns sometimes will get buried. Like, what does like the ground disturbance look like and should look like for something that's also pretty hot?
Yeah, you're dead on it. Those white oaks, chestnut oak, swamp chestnut's a bigger leaf. They get trampled, they get beat down. You're going to see that disturbance. A water oak, a southern red oak, they're eating those little acorns up, and it just kind of looks matted down there, if that makes sense. Like when you walk under that drip line of any hot tree, you're walking through the woods, and then all of a sudden you get under that tree, and it's like you can't even hardly hear yourself walk. That's because the deer been stomping it down, And I want it to look like there's been goats in there, because that's what a deer is, you know. But I had a friend that says a deer is nothing but a goat with highly athletic ability and nocturnal tendencies.
I like that.
Good point.
Good old pine goats.
Yeah, yeah. So when they get in there, you're going to have that fresh disturbance on the ground. Sometimes you'll be able to see the tracks and stuff, but like on a water oak, it's just going to look slick under there.
So to go even deeper on this, you've already mentioned like you want to see 5, 6, 8 piles of droppings underneath the tree to feel confident. Maybe can you paint a picture? I mean, really, you explain it, but I just want to kind of go a little more in depth on the sign underneath the tree. Where like, yes, this is feed sign, but it's not worth me hunting compared to 100 yards down here. This tree's smoking hot. I've got to sit it. What's the difference between just finding some feed sign versus finding like the smoking hot tree?
Yeah, it's a gut feeling. You know, it's a instinctive type thing. There's a lot of times where you'll find you may walk for an hour or two, and then you find some sign, you get really excited, and then all of a sudden you push your chips in, and then you go back to the house, you know, or whatever, and you come back and hunt it, whatever. But you realize later that you saw some deer when you hunted in the distance, and they all kind of stayed. Maybe if you'd kept going, there's another tree right on down the ridge that, you know, this tree has 2 or 3 piles of droppings, and we got excited because that's all we found today. But there may be one just right over the hill that's red hot, you know. So usually when I find one, a lot of times when you find a hot tree, or really any feed tree, there's going to be trails coming in. You'll be able to see faint trails coming from different directions or whatnot. And sometimes you can kind of backtrack those things. You know, sometimes a deer may feed at this tree and that tree and this tree. They may kind of bounce around for different ones, but there's going to be one that's going to be hotter than the rest, usually, on an average year.
And I bring that up just because I'm thinking now through the process of it's bow season, and you're out there and you're spot checking. You get your bow in your hand, you got your stand on your back. You're trying to work your way into an area that you've already been glassed, but you're just trying to figure out where am I going to set up tonight? Because that's the one thing about feed tree hunting from all the guys we've interviewed, especially all the Arkansas guys hunting big river bottom, is they're, unless it's for like a couple day window of time, they're never hunting the same tree more than just a couple times, and it's within like a day or two of each other. Typically before they're moving on to the next hot tree. Because I've been burned, and I think a lot of audience members, when we've talked about this, they're like, man, I've tried feed tree hunting, it doesn't work for them. And like, I found the droppings and everything. If they ever show us photos, it's piles of droppings underneath, and there's disturbance, but all the droppings are dried up. It's probably 4, 5, 6, 7 days old. And the deer just aren't there anymore. It hasn't rained, because when it rains, it mats all the leaves back down. So that's another thing. Like, and maybe you talk about this too. Like, if you're in a drought, a tree could look hot for a while if you're not paying attention to the droppings, because the leaves are all lofted up and you're finding those busted casks, but it hasn't rained to mat everything back down again. Versus if you're getting rains every 4 or 5 days, to me, it's almost easier to see which tree is actually being worked the best, because not only the fresh droppings, but those leaves are still lofted, even though it rained 3 days ago. Like, they've been in here in the last 3 days and kicked all that stuff back up, specifically talking like a white oak or red oak. But that's where I've seen guys message us saying they haven't had successes. Typically, it's like they're hunting a tree that was really good probably a week ago, and they're sitting old sign, and the deer have moved on from that point.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common, really. And I think, you know, you can, when you go in there and you find something like that, unless it's right before rain now, the deer know you've been in there, right? So you get in there and you start walking around that tree looking at all the sign, and you're getting all excited. Your best chance is to hunt it right then, if it's fresh sign. All right. If not, you found it, and then maybe your next chance to hunt isn't for 3 or 4 days because you got work, family, whatever, and then you go back in there and you're not seeing anything, and the sign looks not as fresh. Well, those deer picked up on you being in there, and they just moved to the other tree that they like on down the ridge or whatever, you know. So that's where I feel like your first time in is your best shot. And if you're scouting before the rain like that, you know, you add those two together, then you get that surprise element that's where the juice is, you know, catching them off guard. And I'll tell you another thing, as you mentioned the drought, especially in the past several years, we've had a lot of these dry early falls, you know, and early bow season, it may not rain for a month, you know. If that's the case, a lot of times it'll look like powder up under a real hot tree, you know, that they've just obliterated all the leaves and stuff. But this may be a theory, but in my mind, it makes sense. I feel like when it's really dry like that, I have to hunt less droppings than I normally would. Kind of like what I mentioned on heavy acorn crop year, the sign's more spread out. When it's really dry, I think they don't use the bathroom as much. So y'all can keep that one in your brain and think about it, but I feel like I don't see as many droppings, even on a hot tree, as I would when you have average rainfall.
Interesting.
Just something I picked up on.
I've heard guys talk about this too, where sometimes when you go and you just find the mother lode of sign, that a lot of times you're finding that tree kind of on the back end of when it's going to be good. Yeah. You know, is there a way that you found to identify when a tree is just starting to get hot, where maybe there's a little bit of sign underneath it, but there's something about the setup or the area where you're like, okay, this is probably going to get really good in the next week or so. Like by next Saturday, this should really be on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of times you can find a place where, let's paint the picture of it's early October. The white oaks aren't quite like, they're not prime. There's one or two starting to drop a little bit. But you notice maybe we had one of those storms that comes through that time of year, and it blows a bunch of stuff down, and it blows some green acorns on the ground. Well, if you'll go scout about 2 days after that, you'll find that deer are already pouncing on those green acorns in a few places. Well, when that happens, you're a week or two away from that tree naturally dropping probably. If they're already eating them when they're green and they're keyed in on it, you better be there when it starts raining.
That's good. Another thing just about feed trees, and I experienced this last year and ended up killing a buck, which you said one of your favorite trees to hunt is a water oak. Kind of later in the season dropping, and we've talked a lot about that, just from like a quality food source, especially down here in Alabama. Depending on where you're at in the state, we have, I think it's 5 distinct different rut time frames. Well, a lot of places we hunt, it's like December, January, water oaks are starting to drop that time, or they have been dropping for just a little bit. And like you said, that kind of, especially one of these real big water oaks, it'll just drop for, it seems like, for weeks.
Yeah.
And you'll have feed sign underneath it, but the feed sign is very different. Like you'll find a pile of droppings, but you don't have the tilled up ground, and you don't find busted caps. It's just like you find droppings, and if it's really hot, it's like they're eating them as soon as they're hitting the ground, so you don't even find a ton of acorns on the ground.
That's right.
I had a hunt last year on some public land where I ended up killing a buck, where me and our buddy Cade and camera guy went in there, scouted the day before, ended up finding, and I told him, like, one of the things we need to look for is water oaks by the time of year that we were in there in December, and start walking and looking for feed sign in a couple of these little bottoms, and ended up finding not just a couple of water oaks, but like it was a huge area of water oaks that were chock full of acorns on the ground, droppings literally everywhere. And it was like one of those things that this is a firearm hunt that we were scouting for. And, with the bow, I was like, this would be super tough, because literally there is fresh droppings. Like you're just walking between the tree, and there's fresh droppings everywhere. And there's buck sign everywhere. But I'm like, we got a gun in our hand, a little bit better situation. We can kind of sit and cover a lot of this, at least pockets of it. And we ended up going that next morning and ended up seeing 2 or 3 shooters, and ended up finally killing one.
Nice.
And it was awesome. But it was one of those things that, 2 things when you're hunting water, especially if it's large, expansive, I've done this in Arkansas too, they can walk across it so quiet. Like those leaves do not make any sound. And typically it's a little bit softer bottom anyways, and it's just, they're so quiet. You don't hear them coming. You have to look for them, which makes it challenging. Like you can't be playing on your phone. You got to be looking around the whole nine. But because unless you're finding droppings, it's super hard to tell what tree is actually the hot tree. So from a bow hunting perspective, what is the process of looking for water oaks? Is it just more isolated water oaks? Or if you get in a section where there's quite a few dropping, what's going through your mind of like, which tree should I actually try to set up on, or what position should I set up on to kind of catch them flowing through here if they're going to feed on 8 or 9 or 10 trees?
Yeah, great question. So if we're looking at water oaks as a whole, some of the different places I've hunted, Sometimes the water oaks are down in the creek bottoms. All right. Well, most of the time they're going to be in low terrain, right? Sometimes we're talking creek bottoms, and sometimes you get into those oak flats like what you're describing, and then sometimes those water oaks are maybe on field edges, so that's like big ag fields or pastures or something like that. So we're kind of talking a couple different scenarios, but like in the oak flats, like what you're talking about, somewhere, if you're talking maybe a 10-acre, 5-acre area that's just big, water oaks in there, there's going to be somewhere in there that those deer want to walk. Okay, there's going to be a little depression, or maybe a little ridge, or maybe a blow-down tree that's fallen over. I'm going to find something to put those deer, that puts me where those deer are naturally walking. And sometimes you have to get creative on something like that. There could be an old barbed wire fence. It could be some water that's backed up into a little place like that. Finding an area that you can pinch those deer down, because if not, you're just climbing and hoping, and that's not really what you're looking for, So that's where, especially in traditional archery, you can't just be in the spot. You got to be in the spot on the spot, because I need them close. Mm-hmm. So looking for those isolated oaks in that kind of situation may be a better option. A water oak dropping on a field edge where it's getting that sunlight, what we're talking about, it's going to have millions of acorns in it. That's hard to beat.
I think that's a good opportunity to kind of transition over into setups. Mm-hmm. And to start off, what got you into traditional bow hunting?
Yeah, so I hunted with a compound for a long time, and I was hunting in a place that had just a whole lot of deer down in South Alabama, a whole lot of pigs too, and there was just a lot of opportunity. And I kind of started getting to that point where I don't want to say I was bored with it, but the fire kind of started to fizzle. The flame wasn't as strong as it was. And I don't want that to sound like, bad or whatever, but it's just, after a while, it just kind of turned into work. It was like, okay, we were in a situation where we needed to kill a whole lot of does. There was just a lot on the property. And then I started filming and just trying to add some challenge into it. I'm kind of one of those guys, I like to do things the hard way for whatever reason. And I had gone on a 3D shoot with a friend, and he had a buddy there that was in traditional archery, and he was shooting wood arrows and the whole thing. And he told me a story about him killing deer with a stone point, and I was just like, oh, wow, this guy's next level, And I just thought it was really cool, and I went and got me a longbow, and I started shooting the longbow, practicing with it. And man, I couldn't get comfortable with it. And I realized I had too much bow, which we can talk a little bit more about. But I put it up, got rid of it, actually sold it to my buddy that got me into bow hunting. He still hunts with it. So time went on, and I just kind of kept having that urge to get back into it. And my uncle had an old recurve that I had around the house growing up, and I'd shot some, and I started tinkering with it, and then realized, okay, I need to get something. And I'd bow fished a lot. Back before I got into turkey hunting, I bow fished in the spring and summer, and did that for a long time. And I shot instinctive, and I knew I could be accurate if I could just I couldn't get my form right with the traditional archery. So I went going down in poundage and got me a bow that I was comfortable with, and just was hard-headed and said, I'm going to stick with it until I get it right, and those early years I was shooting 6 or 8 yards. It was a close range. I was like, if I could just get good at this distance, and I just kind of kept spreading my wings a little bit more. And man, the first one, let me back up. Before the first one I killed, I missed probably 6 or 7 in a row. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. And I thought, man, I don't know. How did the Native Americans live? How did they not starve to death? Like, this is crazy. What am I doing? I just kept missing. Like, I'd be shooting good out to 15 yards, on the ground at home. And then I'd get in a tree and just whiff right over the back every time. So then I realized, okay, there's something about I'm shooting high every time. Why am I shooting high? Don't have any sights. There's nothing. And I got me a 3D target and put up a ladder stand in my yard and started shooting from elevated position. And I realized pretty quick, this is how I'm missing. So that's something that I would encourage anybody if you're going to get into traditional archery, especially if you're shooting instinctive, which I recommend, you need to practice from an elevated position. And it made all the difference in the world for me. I started killing deer when I started practicing in a real life situation. I could move my target from 5 yards to 15 to quartering away to behind the tree, and started kind of creating those realistic hunting scenarios. And I got comfortable with that. And when that first doe walks up to 10 yards and she got broadside, and a recurve is shooting like, I don't know, 150, 180 feet per second. When you're staring at that spot instinctively where you want your arrow to go and you release it, it's like slow motion. You can see the arrow spinning, and it just, that first one, I'll never forget. I could watch the feathers just spin and disappear right where my eyes were looking, and just zip right through her. And I felt like, just like I killed the biggest buck ever, That feeling that I had been missing all came back right then. Like I felt like I could have just jumped out of the tree stand, And she ran over there and piled up, and it was, since then, I've been hooked, And I think it's as much as all the practice, all the thousands and thousands of shots to get comfortable, hunting with it. Shooting instinctive, I feel like, is even that much more rewarding because you have nothing to help you. You've just got that stick and string and an animal. So, normally you draw your bow and you put the pin where you want it. Now you're just looking where you want your arrow to go, just like throwing a baseball. And when the arrow hits its mark, that's enough in itself, even at a target, to make you feel that rush. But when you add a deer into it, man, it's an adrenaline rush that's like no other.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool. So you missed a whole lot before you got one. Did you have a lot of problems with your setups initially? Were you setting up the same way that you were setting up with a compound, or did you have to immediately change some stuff?
It's been a progression over time. Those first early years, I didn't really know what I was doing. I read and I researched and I studied what I could. But I realized pretty quick that my setup wasn't dialed in. It wasn't as efficient as it needs to be from a technical archery perspective. If your arrow is not flying right, say if it's kicking, your feathers are going to help with that, but it's still not flying like a bullet. And when it hits, I wasn't getting good penetration. And I thought, man, that's just because, the bow's not as strong as a compound. But what I realized was my arrow, I was shooting way too stiff of a spine arrow, and it was just wobbling. And when it would hit, the natural energy wasn't driving, it was still wobbling. So I wasn't getting the max efficiency out of the bow. And once I started dialing in, okay, this is what I got to do to make it right, I started getting pass-throughs. Same equipment, yeah.
Okay. I worded that poorly. That's good, and we're gonna get back into that. What I mean is, like when you're setting up on a feed tree,
tree stand setup.
Yeah, like tree stand
Okay.
setup, like how you're setting up relative to a trail or a feed tree or whatever you're hunting to position yourself for a shot. Like, were you climbing as high, or were you trying to get more cover, or just what does the situation look like?
Yeah, so cover is a big thing. Got to have cover, but I mentioned, can't just be in the spot. You got to be on the spot, right? You got to micro adjust your setup. About the time I got into traditional archery, I got hooked up with another woodsman that just is a legendary woodsman, Mr. Warren Womack, which you guys know. I think y'all have had him on a time or two. Mm-hmm. And gosh, man, you're talking about fine tuning a craft. This guy's got it dialed in, and I learned so much from him. He came down and hunted with me, and And I learned a lot from him as far as, dialing in on getting them sure enough close. But, and I could go on about him. I got some other stories that we could tell. But anyway, you got to be on the downwind side, right? So let's say we're painting a picture of we've got a hot tree. We found it. They're coming. We know this is the right spot. We've got to get on the downwind side. We got to figure out where the deer are going to come from. How are they going to use the terrain to get to that tree? Okay, that's a big thing, because a lot of times, especially in a place where deer get some pressure on them, a deer's going to come in from downwind if it can. It's going to come in from uphill if it can, a lot of times. So when you get to a spot where you're like, all right, I know they're coming, where are they going to come from? How are they going to use the terrain in their favor to try to position themselves where they have the upper hand? They're going to do it every time, just like a turkey, right? When he comes in looking, he's not going to just walk up in there in the open. He's going to come in where he can check things out before he comes in. Same way the deer. So you kind of have to think, you got to think like a deer. And if you can visualize, like before you climb a tree, okay, where do I feel like the deer is going to come from? Is he going to use this little strip of brush right here, which is something Mr. Warren showed me. We climbed the trees together in an area, and he said the deer going to come from right here. And I'm like, he's never been there before. I'm like, they're going to come from over there. He's like, no, they're going to come from right here. He knew because he's reading the landscape. There's a little finger of brush. I mean, you wouldn't even notice it really. But he's like, I'm telling you, that's where. And we didn't see any deer that day, but I went over there and looked, and sure enough, there was a little faint trail, and I'm like, I bet you that's exactly where those deer were going to come from. And over time, I've kind of learned that, So I changed my setup. With a compound, you can get any old climber and go climb a tree and get within compound range. But I switched to a real lightweight lock-on stand and several different climbing methods that I use. I adopted a lot of that from Mr. Warren. And you can put that little lock-on in all kind of different trees. And you got to have cover, right? So I'm looking for cover. I'm looking for the downwind side, and I'm looking for any kind of terrain that the deer might use. It may be a blown down tree. It may be a log that juts out. It may be a slight depression in the ground, whatever it is. And you just kind of have to get the feel for that kind of stuff. And, if you can catch a deer coming in, if I feel like, okay, they're going to come in from the northeast and come off the side of that ridge and use this little finger and come in, that's great. But then if there's one blowdown tree that kind of comes out to the edge of the drip line of the tree that I'm hunting, he's not going to walk through that treetop, right? He's going to come around the edge of it. So instead of picking that tree, I may pick this tree, and put myself where I can get that deer within 12 yards instead of 22 yards.
In some situations, do you ever find that it's just difficult to get the cover that you need?
Oh, yeah.
Especially in some of these hardwood bottoms. Like I'm running through 3 or 4 spots in my head that I'm planning on hunting this year, assuming the oak tree's made. And it's kind of like that. There's, big trees down in the bottom, and they're basically slick up until you get to the canopy. And there's just not that much cover. So do you ever carry cover with you? Put anything on your stand to kind of conceal you or anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like a lot of times I'll cut some cedar limbs on the way in, and take them up with me or catch them with my hook. My pull-up rope's got a hook on it, and I'll leave them at the base of the tree, pull them up and arrange them in my favor if I need to. But I like beech trees. I like cedar trees. If you can get lucky and find a magnolia tree.
Oh yeah.
But I'm always hunting something with cover in it, And I also learned, kind of to your question, that when I was hunting with a compound, 25 feet was pretty average height for me, I don't hunt that high anymore. With a recurve, I like to be around 18 feet. So, which gives you a better angle on the deer. I feel like it's more efficient for killing the deer, but I'm like 6'3", 230, so there's a lot to hide up there. I got to have some cover. So sometimes you got to get creative and put your stand, maybe position it different than you normally would, and use the tree in your favor or whatever. But yeah, cover's king. Got to have it.
Yeah, we one time went scouted with Bobby Worthington, who's well-known traditional bow hunter. And one thing he showed us that I thought was pretty slick, I'm curious if you've ever done this, but he'll find a tree that he wants to hunt, and a lot of times it's just a tree. It's like a telephone pole. But if there's a sapling or a young tree next to it, he'll throw a rope around it and like pull it over to his tree and lash it to the tree and make himself like a little, almost like a blind up there by pulling not cutting them or anything, but just pulling them over and then tying it to the tree where he's at. So all those limbs come out in front of him, and then he'll clip a couple little holes in it.
Perfect. Great idea.
Yeah, I need to do that in a couple spots.
If you were going to cut cedar limbs and take some in with you to add some cover to the setup, are you like attaching it to your stand, or you put it behind? What are you doing if you're
Zip tying that bad boy?
Yeah, if you're carrying stuff in.
A lot of times I'll poke them in, where my straps go in my around the tree right there, around the stand. I'll stick them out right there, or I'll stick a couple in the mesh of the platform out there and just kind of let them drape out over the edge, and something just to break you up and give that depth perception thing that's not looking like a big blob.
Okay.
Hang them up on a limb beside you or your bow holder, or, whatever you can.
What stand do you like to use? You said you got a lightweight lock on.
Yeah, I've been using the Millennium M7, I think. It's a little small, lightweight. Lightweight stand's got a good comfortable seat on it. I like it.
That's half the battle.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I rigged mine up a little different than the way it comes from the factory, but it works for me. So, yeah.
Now, on your arrow setups, you were talking about getting that dialed in. Well, actually, no, before we get to arrow setups, staying on the subject of just setting up in general, there was a lot of things last year when I was hunting with my recurve bow that I did not expect to run into that I ran into. And one of them was the setup and climbing high, like you were talking about. So when I'm gun hunting or hunting with a compound bow, I one stick with a saddle, so I can go to the tip top of the tree if I want to. And that's what I don't go to the tip top, but I climb very, very high with a compound bow. And with the recurve, I'm just much less confident doing that because the angle that you're shooting down at the deer, you have like a smaller target that you're shooting at. And then also just the size of the bow, like getting drawn if you're at a real steep angle, sometimes that's hard, especially if you do have cover around you in the tree. So I didn't expect to run into that. But the other thing I was telling you about earlier is how I shoot, the whole snap shooting method, and not being able to hold that bow back for, like with a compound, if you need to draw and hold it for a minute, you can. And I can't do that with my recurve bow. And so it's like when I'm ready to shoot, I've got to draw and shoot in one motion, essentially. And dude, I got busted like every single time I went in the woods for the first 2 or 3 weeks of season. Every time I saw a deer, I got busted. And I'm curious on your thoughts on the solution to that or anything.
Yeah, it's tough. One thing I learned early on in regards to that is, it's so common you see it on TV or whatever, a deer walks up and you stop it, and you already drawn back and then you stop it and all that. I learned not to do that with traditional archery. I mean, sometimes I will if I need to, but most of the time I would rather shoot the deer walking than I would have it alert, because that arrow is so slow, right? Now, a traditional bow is quieter than a compound. A lot of times you'll shoot and miss and the deer just stand around like they didn't know what happened because it's quieter. But as far as height goes, I mentioned I like that lower height, try to get some cover, remain still. But if you can just let those deer be relaxed when you shoot at them, you got a lot better chance, because if it's a big old smart doe and she locks in, looks up at you or hears that noise, she's going to move, when you shoot, and slows that arrow to go. I've had the arrow go where I was looking and the deer be gone by the time the arrow gets there. Yeah. I mean, it's slow, much slower.
Another thing is setting up in these hills around here. A lot of times the oak trees they're down in bottoms, and so you're kind of boxed in a little bit. You've got hills on both sides of you, and I got, again, busted so many times. I made the deer on our club significantly smarter last year because they would come in like eye level with me, and I'm trying to set up so tight with that recurve bow that if they happen to walk that hill, I mean, they're like from me to you eye level. And yeah, needless to say, I kept getting busted. How do you account for that? Because with a compound bow, I would just back off of a hill. Like I would always try to, if I'm hunting in the bottom, I'd try to not be right at the base of the hill for that reason. But with the recurve, I feel like I'm a lot more limited with it. So have you dealt with that?
Oh yeah. Those tight, kind of a tight SMZ, kind of, you're talking with a big ridge coming up and probably a trail coming down the side hill, and the deer come in, your oak tree may be down here in the bottom, but the deer side hills and then kind of works its way around and comes down in, and you're sitting kind of in between where you're eye level to the deer.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do in that situation, hunting that tree down in that bottom may have a ton of sign, but it's probably a recipe for disaster.
Yep.
Honestly. So what I'll do is I'll figure out, okay, if there's a beat down trail up here and this is where you normally see them coming from, I'm going to get up above that trail, maybe back over here, catch them coming on their way to that tree, especially if you've been hunting it a good bit and seen them coming from the same direction. Just backtrack them, but get above them. You know,
Okay.
and you may wind up still on that ridge, but you're climbing, you know, instead of climbing 25 feet high and then shooting down, you may climb 15 feet high, so you're not at such an angle, you know.
Okay.
But backtrack them. That's what I would do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now getting to the arrows and everything, you mentioned it before we got started, that if you got a compound bow, there are bow shops everywhere all over the place that can help you get it tuned and help you get the right arrows and the whole process. There's not really anything like that. I mean, some bow shops might have a guy who's into traditional archery and he can help you out. But other than that, for me at least, it's been occasionally talking to guys who do it, and then a lot of YouTube videos and things of that nature. What are some early hurdles that people should be aware of if they're wanting to get into traditional bow hunting, that they just need to like kind of put on their checklist of like, hey, you need to make sure you do these things to make sure that you have an effective killing setup?
Yep. Great question. And I learned a lot of that stuff the hard way, you know, and, you know, 8 years ago, whatever, when I started, there was even less info then than there is now, but leaning on other traditional archers is a big thing, you know, and there's online communities as well as physical communities. We've got a couple of different groups around here that everybody that I've met in traditional archery is just great people, very willing to help. And I just went to a trad shoot the other day, and man, you pick up nuggets from other guys, you know, and you learn. And there's guys that were new getting into it that were bouncing stuff off of each other, and so that's cool. A couple things that are sticking out to me is, one, don't get overbowed like I did. And what I mean is, don't buy a bow that's too high of a draw weight, because what happens is your form suffers. If you don't get your form right, you won't ever be as good as you can be at that, you know, at whatever. You know, it may be shooting a free throw, it may be, you know, whatever, hitting a baseball, but in traditional archery, you've got to have your form right. Consistency is everything. So my recommendation would be to get something, most people I would recommend, get something 40 or 45 pounds. Definitely no more than 45 pounds to start out with. What I did is I bought a Samick Sage. You can get them on Amazon for maybe $150 or something. And what I like about it, it's a 3-piece bow, so you can interchange the limbs. So I started with 45-pound limbs, got my form right, and then, you know, wound up increasing my limb weights later on. But yeah, start with a low weight and get you a 40-pound bow and put you thousands of shots downrange. And I had one of those guys in my life early on in archery, in bow hunting. He was like, hey, look, set your effective range at whatever range you can shoot through a soup can consistently. That's where you need to be hunting. If it's 25 yards, it's 25 yards. If it's 10 yards, it's 10. Whatever that is, whether that's compound or traditional, right? So I would say if you're getting to where you can hit a baseball or a softball every time at 10 yards, that's your juice, you know. And then as you continue to grow, that range will extend some. Once you do that, then you can start looking at increasing your poundage, because at this point you've shot thousands of shots, and all of a sudden your muscles are built up, and you're able to hold 45 pounds for several seconds. Then it's time to start looking. Okay, maybe I need to increase to 50 or 55, which you really don't need to. 40, you'll shoot through a deer all day long, but
Yeah.
I like to hunt around that 50 range.
Okay.
So another thing along that point would be your arrow setup.
Yep.
Okay, so when I started, I was overspined on my arrows. I just thought, well, I'll just go buy the same arrows I've been buying for my compound, right? It doesn't work like that. You've got to have an arrow set up that is tuned in with the bow that you've got. All right, so I recommend bear shaft tuning. So taking your arrow and taking a full length arrow and getting it and cutting it as you go, changing your point weight or whatever you got to do to get it to where that arrow is flying, that shaft with a point is flying like a bullet. When you get that dialed in, then you can put feathers on it, and you've got a good setup. Because what'll happen, say if you take a 40-pound bow with a 350 spine arrow and you go shoot it, well, it doesn't G-haul, right? You're way over spined, so your arrow's going to kick to the side. A 40-pound bow, you're probably going to, depending on your point weight, you're probably going to be shooting a 600 spine or maybe a 500 spine. And that's like, most archery shops don't even carry a 600 spine arrow, and you kind of have to order a lot of this kind of stuff. But weight forward is another big thing. I shoot 200 grains on the front of my arrow, so 200 grain broadheads, field points. I tell people, pick your broadhead before you pick your arrow. Figure out what weight broadhead you want to shoot. So for me, I went with 200 grains because that allows me to shoot several different of those Simmons broadheads that I shoot, and I can interchange those because I've got 200. I'm tuned in with 200 grains up front. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So like if you think, okay, I'm going to shoot XYZ broadhead, I like the looks of it, that's what I want to go with, and it's 150 grain, then buy your 150 grain field points and get you maybe a 350 spine arrow, a 400 spine arrow, and a 500 spine. Maybe one of each even, right? And start figuring out with 150 grains, where do I need to be? If it's 400 grain, well, then once you figure out that part, okay, well, I got 400 grains, but it's still kind of kicking one way or another. Well, then you start trimming that arrow back. All right, so if we were shooting full length, now all of a sudden you're cutting maybe a half inch off at a time or less to get you to the point to where it's kicking, and then all of a sudden it's straight. We're talking bear shaft, right?
Are you doing this through paper tuning or just shooting into a foam target?
Foam target.
Okay.
One that'll hold the arrow. A bag target, you can't bear shaft into a bag target, but a foam target.
And what distance are you doing that?
I'm gonna say 5-10 yards, 8 yards.
Okay.
To start out with, and then you can kind of increase that distance to micro tune. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
So once you get in the ballpark, you'll get fairly straight, and then you start fine tuning until you get dead on. So you may wind up cutting that arrow a quarter inch at a time. Even I use hot melt glue, so I can heat up my insert, or heat up, if you're with carbon, heat up the field point, and then it'll heat the insert, and then you can pull it out, cut your arrow, glue it back on. See what I'm saying? Until you can back yourself into, now I've got the perfect shaft and point weight combo.
Okay.
So if you go buy a dozen arrows of whatever spine, chances are you got the wrong arrows.
Right.
And you may wind up selling them to a buddy or something. So I would buy, and you can go to like 3 Year Rivers Archery.
Yep.
They've got some different test kits, like some different field point weights and some different shaft sizes that you can, just get 2 or 3 without having to buy a dozen of this or that. And that's a good way to get yourself dialed in.
Okay. So you start with if you have, let's say, just a 50-pound bow, and maybe you look at, I don't know what all you look at, like bow or the weight, and you say, okay, based on this weight and the point that I'm wanting to shoot. I mean, there's like calculators or whatever online where you can kind of probably shoot a 500, but maybe you need to try a couple different spines. Am I right there?
Yeah, you can get pretty close. I mean, there's a lot of variables, draw length being one. You know, most bows are rated at 28 inches. So if you see a 50-pound bow, it's 50 pounds at 28 inches. So for me, if I've got a 30-inch draw, you're looking at about 3 pounds per inch after 28. So I may be shooting 56 instead of 50, you know, because of a longer draw, and vice versa the other way. But yeah, you can get pretty close. I would rely just as heavily on, or maybe even more heavily on, traditional archery communities.
Yeah.
Online Facebook groups, forums, people that you know.
Mm-hmm.
What's that group in Alabama that you did that shoot with? What group put together?
The last one I did was the Alabama Society of Traditional Bowmen. So you can look them up. They've got I think they've got a website and stuff. They've got several shoots throughout the year, and it's a group of like-minded guys that just enjoy traditional archery, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that, especially like trying to find a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people, we talk about that a lot on podcasts, just for like having a hunting mentor. If you're new to get into it, find someone who's got a lot more experience, that's willing to share, that, you know, hunts similar area to you, that can kind of share some stuff, take you out scouting, you take them out scouting, and maybe even hunt a little bit with them to learn stuff. And the same thing I feel like with the traditional archery is find some like-minded guys that you can go spend some time with that are willing to help, and you be willing to listen to someone. Because listen, I've heard that from a lot of mentors over the years, is like they love helping people, but they hate when they are trying to mentor somebody and the person thinks they already know it and they're asking questions, but they don't really care what the answer is. Yep. So like, if you want to be a good mentoree, you got to be willing to listen and actually try it, and, you know, be honest with them about that.
Absolutely, man. When I was getting into it, really, I still am. I'm a sponge, you know. Like you get around somebody like Mr. Warren, you better be listening, you know, because he's been there and done it, and he's got a lot to. And he was gracious to me and shared a lot with me, and I'm super appreciative of not just him, but other guys that were willing to pour into me, that trying to learn, you know. And I encourage everybody to do that and to be a good listener. And of course, I'll help anybody any way I can.
Yeah. I noticed also on the arrow discussion, you're shooting aluminum arrows, right? So how does the tuning process change with it? Because I grew up shooting aluminum arrows, and when I grew up, we didn't know anything whatsoever about tuning bows or any, like, you just bought some arrows, screwed some broadheads into them, and you were good to go. So how does it change with aluminum arrows? Because I didn't really learn about tuning until I switched to carbon arrows.
Yeah, we had to shoot pie plates. If you shot a pie plate, you're good to go.
You're good to go, boy.
That's right. That's right. Aluminum arrow.
Yeah, great. If you
Okay.
can.
Yeah.
I want to see some of these broadheads too, by the way.
Okay.
Selfishly.
So these are just a few aluminum arrows that I like. So like this right here that's a Simmons Tree Shark broadhead. That's a 200 grain broadhead, and it's like 2 inches cut.
Called the hatchet.
If you ever need to kill a T-Rex,
if you ever need to kill a T-Rex, there you go. These things do great on deer, man. They really do, and they fly great too. But you'll notice, you see how it sits back over the arrow shaft some. That's something you got to think about when, you know, tuning your arrows, because you cut them too short, this will hit your riser when you draw back, or your finger. But like this particular arrow is a 2215. It's an Easton Super Slam 2215. That's the, you know, back in the day, that's how they put the different spines on there. Okay, so 2215 is going to be like I don't have the chart memorized, but it's going to be like probably a 400 or maybe a 380 spine or something like that. Maybe it's a little stiffer than a 400. And then I've got in here a couple of different things. I've got a 2018. This one's a small. All right, so the first number, the 20, is the diameter of the arrow shaft, and then 18 is the thickness of the alloy. So that's what those two numbers mean. So a 2018 is a skinnier diameter than the 2215, but a thicker wall than the 15.
Okay.
So it's going to come out pretty close to that same spine range. Probably going to be, I don't know, somewhere between 350 and 400. That's a Simmons swamp shark right there. That's a great head too.
I've killed some of that head.
Maybe that's a bad dude. I don't know if I could pick a favorite, but that might be it. I shoot a 5-inch feather. These are shield cut feathers. I shoot a left helical, which means my arrow spins back to the left instead of to the right. I've shot both. It's a personal preference thing. I kind of I like a left helical because, and I'll show you on this other arrow right here, it puts a right helical kind of puts the feather in my eyesight a little bit. It kind of gets in my way. A left helical spins it out of the way, it seems like, but you can see right there how that one spins. But that's a Simmons timber shark right there. It's 190 grain. So, 10 grains isn't going to make or break you. I can't find a 190 grain field point, so I shoot 200. But that's a 22-15 spine on that one too.
Do you know what your total arrow weight on these are?
I don't know off the top of my head. These are just some different setups that I've used for hunting over the past. I'm going to say somewhere close to 600.
Okay.
Probably.
Mm-hmm. So now you're mentioning that these are essentially different spines, arrows, and different weights. So you've tuned all these individually where you know that they all hit the same out of your bow?
Yeah. So, this quiver is just an example of some of the different ones. This was for my Black Widow bow. I shot these out of my RK1 and maybe one of them out of a different bow, right? But the way I do it is once I get, all right, so we bare shaft tune, right? Mm-hmm. And we know what shaft we're shooting and we know what point weight. So for me, I'm at 200 most of the time. So now it's time to find a broadhead that's going to fly right. Okay, so let's say we got a dozen arrow shafts laying here that we've been practicing with. They're flying great. You go start screwing broadheads on and shooting them. So you may screw a broadhead onto an arrow and it just dives off low and right. Yep. Okay, well, something's going on right there. So there's several different ways you can find the spine of your arrow. Some of these are probably marked where the spine is, and sometimes that'll make a difference. But what I'll do is, I've got a bunch of arrows and a bunch of broadheads. I'll just start changing arrows and broadheads until I find a broadhead that'll shoot right with that arrow. When I get a set, like I may have 2 or 3 different broadheads in my quiver at one time. They're all the same weight, right? But whatever, I just happened to screw that random broadhead on and it flew like a dart, then that broadhead doesn't leave that arrow for the rest of the season. So I'll shoot it practice until I know, okay, it's hitting like I'm hitting a baseball at 20 or whatever I feel comfortable about. Usually 20 yards is where I want. If I can get it flying right at 20, it's going to be good at 25. It's going to be good at 10, right?
Right.
So when I get one that's flying right at 20, that broadhead and that arrow and that shaft match up. And the only time I take it off is to sharpen it. And that's the beauty of a fixed blade head like this is you may kill 5 or 6 deer with one broadhead. As long as you don't hit a nasty rock or something, sharpen that baby up and it goes right back on that same arrow and it's good to go for the rest of the season. So, a lot of times I'll have an arrow on there. I mean, there may be some of these, a broadhead on there that's just in rough looking shape, that's been sharpened up a bunch of times and probably killed several deer, or shot at several deer.
I was looking at that one earlier. I noticed it's been sharpened. I think that's the same one I was looking at.
Yeah. So, but they last, man, golly, so much longer. Back when I was shooting a compound lot, you shoot a mechanical head and it's most of the time junk after one deer, But this one, even if you miss, no biggie. You just sharpen it back up and put it back on and spin it. I use an arrow spinner to make sure I've got good alignment on my broadhead. And another thing I like about these aluminum arrows, you can heat this thing up and twist it, especially if you're using that hot melt glue. And you can heat it up and twist it and push. And actually, if you're using an arrow spinner with a line down through there, if you rotate that broadhead and it starts wobbling back and forth on the line, it's not lined up right. So you can heat that thing and flex it and twist it and get it to where it starts spinning properly. Yep. That's how we used to do it, man, back in the aluminum days before the carbon, because you got that big fat insert in there and you got glue all around it. But hot melt glue is your friend when it comes to traditional archery, because it allows you to easily take that insert in and out to either adjust your arrow length or to, adjust your broadhead tune.
Okay. How do you like to sharpen those broadheads that have the sweep in them?
Yeah.
Concave.
Because when I was shooting the swamp sharks, I killed a couple deer with them and I resharpened them, but it was never easy to resharpen them, basically. Yeah. So how do you like to do it?
Man, I use a few different methods. I've been shooting Simmons for a long time. If you want a quick, easy touch up, or just an easy option, is the Rada sharpener. It's got the two little, looks like flat washers.
Yeah, I got one.
You can drag it. A concave head like this, you need something round. Okay, a round head and a flat sharpener just don't really mix. I've got a jewel stick. It's a diamond rod that's got a coarse, medium, and fine on it. It works well. I've got a guide that you can put on there to make sure you got the right angle. And I've got a Lansky system. I don't know if y'all familiar with that, where you put it's got a little jig and you put the little rod on the stone, and it's coarse, medium, fine, all that. Mm-hmm. But it sets the angle at maybe 20 or 25 or 30 degrees. And then when it clamps the head in there, so when you're sharpening it, you're on a consistent angle, sharpening that head the entire time. The kicker is you've got to have a burr to get it sharp, meaning you've got to roll this metal over the other way. So like when I'm sharpening, I'll work this one side for a while, all right, until I start feeling a burr all the way down that broadhead, meaning I've rolled the metal over on that side. Then it's time to flip it over, roll the burr back the other way, until you start doing it. Like I may start off with, say on my diamond rod, I may go 20 strokes on one side until I feel that burr. Mm-hmm. But usually you'll start feeling it in one or two spots, but you got to have a burr across the whole thing. I'll roll it over and I'll go 20 on the other side, and then make sure I got a good burr, and then I'll start backing it down to 15, and then it may start at 15. Whatever the number is, doesn't really matter. It's the burr. But then you'll kind of start backing that number down to where eventually you're 3 strokes, 2 strokes, 2 strokes, 1 stroke, and then you get to where it's cutting hair.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got to have a burr. You can sit there and work on this thing and watch 2 hunting shows and it not be sharp because you didn't get the burr set on the front end. And that's what I like about that Lansky system, is you clamp it in that clamp and you take your coarse stone. I use the rounded stones, all right? They got flat ones, what they normally come with, but you can order the rounded stones. And then once you get that angle set, say it's 30 degrees, well, on a new head, it takes you a little while to get that initial burr. But once you get it set, then the touch-up's a breeze because you already got your initial grind.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But quick and easy, say I'm at the truck and I missed 3 that morning and I need a touch-up, I'll take that little Rada, run it through there several times, and, we don't have to be scalpel sharp to kill deer. Mm-hmm. I like them to be real sharp. It just gives you more confidence, but that one there's fairly sharp enough.
Yeah. So we mentioned this deer earlier. To kind of close out, I'd like for you to do a little show and tell. Mm-hmm. This buck you got sitting next to you. We mentioned him earlier, but I would just love to get the story on that deer. That deer's a stud.
That's pretty good.
That's such a good deer, man.
Pretty good. That's kind of like I guess my recurve claim to fame. I guess you would. That's my biggest deer with the recurve.
God, he looks giant on this camera right now.
He's cool.
He looks gigantic.
That's a good buck, man. He's heavy horn. You talking about freaking out when I saw him coming.
Shoot.
So I shot this deer on a water oak in December. I think it's got the date, December 5th, 23. So a little while back, but it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and kind of like what we talked about earlier, that late morning deal. I'd been there since daylight and didn't see a deer. 10 o'clock rolls around. mentioned, he just came strolling up through there and just went straight beeline to that water oak tree and started eating water oak acorns. And man, I had to wait for a while to get a shot, and he's hard on my left shoulder, and I couldn't get my camera to wrap all the way around. Never did get him on camera, but this deer, he came in there and he fed for, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes while I'm up there just shaking, waiting on the right opportunity. He was quartering to. He finally gets broadside, and I kind of wanted one more step, but the wind's blowing from him to me. I could smell him, actually. And all of a sudden, he just picks his head up and looks away from me, like he smelt something upwind from him, I guess, or heard something. I never saw anything else, but he looked that way, and his complete body posture changed. And he just kind of went to alert mode. And I thought, well, it's now or never. It's my time, and drew back, found my anchor, and watched that arrow disappear right through his rib cage. And it was awesome. It was awesome, man. I'll never forget it. 30 minutes after it happened, I'm still up there shaking, But yeah, great buck, man. To kill a mature buck in Alabama with a recurve is tough.
Well, especially a mature buck that looks like that.
It's tough.
That's
Thank you, buddy.
a great one.
I'm happy to have him. It was a cool hunt, cool story, and I'll tell you this: he was a smidge quartering to me, and it went in about this far behind his shoulder, right through his ribs. Great entrance, but it came out kind of low down here, and the deer ran off, and I watched him stop, and I could tell he was sick, and I thought, well, I'm just. And he finally just eased on off. So I sat for another couple of hours, I think, maybe. It was like lunchtime. And I didn't want to bust him out of there, slip out. Came back at like maybe 3 o'clock that afternoon and thought, well, he's had plenty of time, and went over there, trailed good blood right to a bed that had blood in it, no deer. And I'm like, oh no, man. You got to be kidding. I watched my arrow go right through his rib. And 2 drones and 3 tracking dogs later, still no deer. Yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, man, how did this thing get away? I know it went right behind the shoulder. And about 2 or 3 days had gone by, and I just had that gut feeling like, I know he's dead. I know he is. And there's one area that I hadn't really looked. And I took my son in there, and we looked, couldn't find him, and was headed back to the truck and walked up on him, bedded down up under a privet hedge. He was dead, stiff dead, been dead for 2 days, and nothing had gotten on him or anything. And I don't know if the drones couldn't find him because he was up under that privet hedge and probably his body temp had dropped or whatever, but the dogs, nothing against them. They just never could get on him. But yeah, just the old spidey sense, the gut feeling, and just happened to find him.
How far was he from where you shot him?
He was probably 350 yards, maybe 400.
Wow.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe a little more than that, actually. He had crossed a creek and went up a hill and died on that hill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hey, man, tough animals.
Tough critters, man.
Tough critters.
Yeah. But I'm so thankful to get him, and he might would have been shoulder mounted if I'd have found him right off. But yeah, that's a good buck. And what makes it so cool is, for me, is I'm not a big corn guy, not a big trail camp guy. I didn't have any pictures of deer, never knew he was alive, nothing. I was hunting deer sign. Mm-hmm. And that's the way I like to do it, and to get a mature buck kind of on my terms was very rewarding, because it takes a lot of tree stand hours to get one, hunting on natural food sources, hunting with a recurve, and trying to do it the hard way, I guess you would say. Not trying to throw shade on anybody that hunts over corn. It just doesn't do it for me. Not saying I won't, I will. I'll shoot a few deer over corn. I'll do it. I will, if I get in the back. But no, I just, I love hunting those oak trees, and to get one, on a water oak, pick the right tree, to do all those little things right, and it come together. It was really cool.
Man, I've always been a big rut hunter. Like, everyone enjoys hunting the rut, but these last 5 or 6 years where I've really tried to dial in the early season, I really, really love early season. There's something about it, hunting the feed trees. It's just so fun. It's just the sign reading. You never know when they're going to come in there, especially the does. I feel like a lot of times it's just quiet all morning and they just come running in. Like, they lay there till they can't handle it anymore. They're so hungry or something, and then they come running in, and then all of a sudden there's deer in front of you.
Yeah.
And I've come to really love it. It's one of my favorite times of year to hunt now. I wanted to ask you, by the way, when you're aiming at a deer, this is like jumping way back in the conversation, but I completely forgot to ask about it till you told that story. When you're aiming at a deer with the recurve bow and you're focusing on a spot, is there any particular spot that you like to focus on, or are you like just a tuft of hair? Because I've heard guys say they'll aim at like the elbow or something like that. But when you're having to focus in on one spot, you don't have a pin or anything, what's your go-to?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked that, because you can, you got to be low. I'll say that. My eyes are looking low for sure. Where that elbow is right there, I'm going to come back about an inch or so. Mm-hmm. We're talking broadside, right? But the best way for me to say it is aim for the exit. So, like, in my mind, I'm visualizing like a racquetball inside that deer's chest cavity, if that makes sense. Mm. So if you think about where that deer's heart is, a small ball. So if that deer's quartering away, to hit that ball, you may have to come back last rib, right?
Yeah.
To be able to hit that spot. So I'm kind of visualizing where do I need my arrow to come out. If it's the opposite leg, I'll follow that opposite leg up until I find my mark. But all the time, my eyes are going to be low, because 90-something% of the time, that deer's going to react before the arrow gets there.
Okay.
I've even heard people say they want a louder bow, because if it's quiet, sometimes the deer reacts, sometimes it doesn't. A louder bow, it's going to react. So it's
so
putting more. Yeah, that's kind of the thoughts. I'm not going to try to get my bow louder, but most of the time, a deer's going to react.
Yeah.
And that deer didn't flinch. He was focused at something else and wasn't paying attention. I don't know if you guys saw the last video I put up, but that deer, it's a good one, you ought to watch it. But that deer, he saw me about the time I hit anchor and looked right at me, and he, squatted to lunge and pushed off and hit him right in the shoulder blade. But
yeah,
most of the time that deer's going to react, and when I say react, they're going to lunge. To push off, they got to squat. Can't jump flat-footed, so they got to lower themselves to get out of there.
Yeah.
And high is never good in bow hunting. So usually I want to be only into that deer that much as far as my point of focus.
Okay.
And speaking of that, focus is everything on instinctive shooting. You've got to be burning a hole, like you got Superman laser vision focused on where you want that arrow to go and nothing else.
Yeah.
If you start looking at his rack or thinking about other things, your arrow tends to go places it doesn't need to go.
And that's such a good reminder, because we got all our bows here, and I think we're going to go shoot a little bit after this, get some photos and everything. Well, before you got here, I brought my bow and I was stump shooting, because I was like, man, I'm going to look like an idiot, because I'm sure you're a much better shot than me.
No.
So I need to dust off. And I was shooting at this little black piece of pipe that's out there, like one of those little drainage pipes for gutters. Mm-hmm. And I kept missing it to the left over and over and over again, like 3 inches to the left. I'm like, what in the world? And then the last time, I just, like what you said, it was like tunnel vision. I was like, I'm going to hit that dang thing. And I just center punched it on the last shot. And it was a reminder to me of, like, again, kind of knocking the dust off, because I haven't been shooting that much lately, of like the focus aspect. It's, to me, really unique about shooting a traditional bow is like, you really do. I mean, you are, I don't know, tunnel vision, burning a hole. I don't know how to explain it, but when you like focus on something and that arrow just smacks it right where you're looking, like you were saying with the doe earlier, it does something. You're like, oh, that was awesome. And I don't get that with a compound.
That's right.
Like even target shooting with a compound, I'm just like, yep, that's where it was supposed to hit. But with the recurve, I'm like, I hit it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That feeling right there. Yeah, that's what's so great. And then you put a deer in the mix, and it's just exponentially magnifies that feeling.
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
And I'll say this too: in traditional archery, there's different ways of, as you research it, there's different aiming methods.
That's what I wanted to ask. Okay.
Yeah. So some people do the thing where they I don't have my bow, but they hold this, count how many. I don't know how they do it, but they hold. If the knock's here, they'll hold down way down below it.
Yeah.
And some people do like I think they call it gap shooting and string walking that kind of. I had never really gotten into that. It doesn't appeal to me. I feel like what you just described, that feeling of elation where you hit where you're looking, that goes away. I feel like if you have an aiming method, I might as well put a sight on it if I'm going to use the tip to aim, kind of thing. It just doesn't really appeal to me, but nothing against it. It's just instinctive archery to me is so rewarding, and instinctive bow hunting is even more rewarding.
Yeah, and there's another method. I don't know if you do this, but like I think it's point on shooting. And if I'm understanding it correctly, I don't do it, but I've heard people talk about it. Where with your setup, there's a certain distance where when you're aiming, the point of your arrow is dead on at like 23 yards. It'll be different for everybody's bow, but that's a way to kind of gauge of like how you can aim a little bit. Where if that deer is at that range, you can just put the arrow right where you want it to go. And I don't know if I got that wrong. No, y'all let me know.
I don't know.
That's how Steve shoots. So that's how I learned to shoot with Steve, was point on.
Okay.
Which is how he explained it, and we did it. Every bow, every arrow, everything shoots different, but it's like whatever you're going to hunt with, you keep shooting. You like start 5 yards back all the way up until you find your point on. Where like when you draw back, you have your anchor point. Where your point is, like on the target, on the bullseye, that's where it's going to hit at a certain distance, and you use that calculating. 5 yards further up, I got to hold X amount lower down.
Yeah.
5 yards further back, I got to hold X amount above it, and so on. But that's how he taught me to shoot, which is different because it's like you're drawing, you're not snapshot. You're drawing back, you're holding the bow, you got your point, and then you release. But it's like focus on where the point is, where your target is, and calculating the difference. But yeah, this string walking, gap shooting, all that kind of stuff. I've never seen somebody do it, but I've heard guys talk about it, which is kind of interesting for different ranges where you're actually putting your fingers on the string and so on. But
yeah, I can't really even describe it intelligently. I hadn't looked into it that much, but I'll tell you that when you shoot instinctive, like I don't even look at anything else but where I want my arrow to go. If I do start looking at something else, like if I look at my arrow or something, that's when my shot just goes bananas. But if I look at and just focus on that target, and I'll tell you what else is like your brain starts to kind of figure out an algorithm or what, it starts to learn the trajectory of that arrow, and that's when you can, maybe not hunt from a real far distance, but target shooting from further back. It's amazing how subconsciously you learn. You're not like, okay, I'm gonna aim up 12 inches. You just do it, and it just once you get enough shots under you, that your brain just kind of learns that trajectory, and it just works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's fun too. Especially like stump shooting that little judo point.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see like a pine cone way on out there, and you're like, I'm gonna launch it at that thing and just see,
Yeah.
It's so fun, man. Well, you got a lot going on these days. So you're selling for Whitetail Properties right now.
That's right. Yeah, Whitetail Properties real estate and selling land and loving it.
Nice.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that now?
About 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 or 8 months. Yeah, it's been great, man. It's a great company and a great gig. I love it, and I get to be in the woods doing what I love and helping people at the same time.
What's your territory that you kind of cover?
The Black Belt mostly. Yeah.
Oh,
so that West Central Alabama. Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, man, when I started hunting the Black Belt, I just fell in love with it down there. And
Dude.
It's just a lot of game.
It's a special place, man. I grew up small game hunting down there a lot. I still haven't deer hunted it very much. I've deer hunted it a little bit, but small game, we used to rabbit hunt down there when I was a kid, squirrel hunt, fox squirrels and everything. It's a special place. One day when I hit it big, I'll give you a call.
Call me up,
down there.
man. Yeah. I'll have a spot ready for you.
Yeah, man. And then tell people about your YouTube channel.
Yeah, so it's Sawbriar Outdoors on YouTube, and you can get on there and see most of my stuff's traditional archery, a little bit of turkey hunting and some fishing, and I hadn't been cranking out content like I need to, but I've got some good things in the works, so y'all stay tuned on that.
Yeah, we'll link it. We'll link that video that you were talking about, your last video. So
Good.
people
Yeah, I
go check
appreciate
it out.
that.
Go
Yeah.
subscribe.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Give me the thumbs up and the subscribe, all that good stuff. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'm willing to help anybody I can, especially when it comes to traditional archery. All those lessons I learned the hard way, let me help you shortcut that by, listening to this podcast. I think you guys will get, anybody that's looking to get into traditional archery, I think can maybe learn a thing or two. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ben, appreciate you coming down here and doing
Yes,
the
My
interview
pleasure.
with us. Again, it took us 8 years to do it, but finally we made it. Now we're going to have you on for turkeys. But yeah, thanks for coming by. And for all the audience members out there, thank y'all for watching the show. Thank y'all for listening. We'll catch you back here on the next episode of the Southern Outdoorsman. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.